So basically, I am working as an engineering manager in a health tech company. So today we'll be basically having basically evaluating you on the basis of first DSA, then the Python concepts.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so as I already mentioned that the interview will be focused on DS and Python. So basically the first, let's say 30 minutes we'll spend on DS Algo,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest 30 minutes we'll spend on Python, which will cover, let's say, some things like async AIO and generators. We'll talk about, let's say, maybe unit testing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And difference between async and like what is the threads, why async I over threads, right? So questions like this we'll discuss, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So okay, okay, are you able to see the problem?
Yeah.
Okay. So okay, let me brief the problem statement for you. So basically, you have a big file, a very big file, right? You have to read it in batches.
Okay.
So you are given the batch size. So basically, this is a function. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is the not the function exactly. This is the, let's say we can overlap in this function. Just give me- okay, you basically have to complete this. Let's say we have for loop here, right? So basically, how will you read the file here? So you basically have to write the code here to read the file in batches. So batch size is given to you,
Mm-hmm.
the file name is given to you. So what you have to do is you have to basically yield a list of lines where each list can contain up to, let's say, batch size lines. Let's say I have a big file. That big file contains, let's say, 12 lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and my batch size is 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sorry, batch size is 5, right? So what can I do is I'll basically print first 5 lines, then I'll print next 5 lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I have 2 lines only, right, left. So I'll print the last 2 lines.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. So did you get the problem?
Yeah. Um. So you first we need to print the first 5 lines. I mean,
Yes, basically the
how much
batch
was the
size.
batch
So
size?
let's say we have a function here. Let's say batch reader function.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the batch file reader function here, right? So this function accepts, let's say, file name, and for second thing is batch size,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is, let's say, by default 3, right? So basically you have to complete this function, which will print the list of lines. The list will have a size of, let's say, batch size at max,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have to write your code here. So that's it. You have to complete this function.
Got it.
Okay, you can start. If you have any doubts, please feel free to ask any questions.
Okay.
If that's okay for you, then we can start writing the coding.
Mm-hmm.
One more thing, sorry, which I forgot to mention you, that you have to strip the new line characters from the lines, right? So the new line characters at the very end, you have to strip off that.
Okay.
So, okay, so basically you are iterating it. Strip line, then count, you're incrementing the count, then you're saying if count percent batch size percent equal to 0, which means let's say batch size is 3, so count is started to 1. So count is started to 0. Okay. So count is 1, then 2, then 3. Okay, S is right. Okay, okay. Okay, one problem here. So
Mhm.
we have to yield the list, not the string.
I see.
Yes. So yes, create a list and append it to the list. Okay. On 20th line, do we need to return it and assign it to the variable s? Does append function return the modified list or none?
Uh, yeah. Sorry.
Then if count percent batch size is 0, then yield s. Else, else yes, yes to empty list. Okay. Let me know when you are finished.
Yeah. Um, Maybe there are some remaining lines.
Mm-hmm.
Um, oh no, sorry. This is wrong. Let's- Um, so this return will return any remaining lines. For example, if the batch size is, if there are 15 lines and batch size is 4, um, the last 3 lines will be remaining and then they'll get returned at the end.
Okay, let's do it yield only instead of return. Let's write yield here.
Okay.
Okay. Hmm. Okay. Correct. Fine. We can then now jump to another problem statement.
Okay.
So let's jump back to DSL problem. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess the problem is visible to you. Problem statement.
Yeah.
So basically, you are given, let's say, n pairs of parentheses. You have to write a function to generate all combinations of well-formed parentheses. Well-formed parentheses by mean proper balanced parentheses, right? So
Mm-hmm.
let's say n is 3. So these are the combinations.
Mm-hmm.
Or let's say 3 pairs of parentheses. So for n is 1, this is the output. So n can be between from 1 to 8.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. So for 3, okay, for 3, how many parentheses we can have?
Um,
Okay, instead of, let's say, instead of going into the count, let's generate it. Okay,
mhm.
let's write a function to generate that.
Okay, got it. So the function needs to return a list of all the valid parentheses.
Yes, yes. So basically, you will be having a function which will accept n as an argument
Mhm.
and an integer, and basically the return type will be a list of strings.
Got it. Gen parentheses, and it will accept n as an integer, and return a list of strings.
str. Yes, correct.
Okay. And the all the parentheses in the return list must be valid, right? Like
Yes,
they
yes, they
can't
should
be
be valid parentheses. Correct.
understood. Okay. Hmm. Okay. So one component of this must be to figure out whether a parenthesis is valid or not.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm thinking I should write a function which just checks valid given a string of parentheses.
Okay.
It will return me whether or not it is true or whether it is valid or not. And for every parenthesis that I generate, I must check whether each of them are valid. Yeah, so if it is valid, then I'll add it to this list. If it is not valid, then we will not add it to the list.
Okay, so okay, the way you are checking the valid parentheses, we'll come to that. Okay,
Mhm.
later. So in generate parentheses, so
Mhm.
will you generate the all combination? So let's say okay, let's say we have n as let's say three, right?
Mhm.
If n is three, then we'll be basically having let's say six positions to fill, right?
Yeah,
So for every position, you will let's say place open one time open parenthesis, one time closed parenthesis, and we'll create strings, and then we'll check the is valid
yeah.
whether it's valid or not. What's the time complexity for that solution?
Mm, so I'm thinking of using some sort of a DFS in order to generate all the possible strings, right? So essentially, the way it works, DFS is like a tree structure. So let's say you start with one open, one closed,
Okay, let's start
and then
coding.
at
I understood.
each, yeah, just give me a second. I'm
Sure,
trying
sure.
to figure out the complexity. Yeah, so it creates like a binary tree, and the number of levels depends on n. So just the generation part will be an n log n um, time complexity. Plus, if you add in the valid, checking the valid part,
Mm-hmm.
then for each particular string, you will have to it'll take an O of n to check whether they are valid or not because I'll be using a stack in
Understood.
order to figure out the validity. So something like an n square log n.
Understood. Understood. Okay, let's complete the code.
Okay. Do you want me to write the valid part or just the generator part?
Let's start with the generate parenthesis first. Then we have to write a complete working code. Actually, we have to run it for few test cases as well. So let's
Okay.
complete both, but start with parenthesis.
Okay. Got it. Do you mind if I first try it out on my notes?
Yes, yes, no issues.
So I'll start with an empty string.
Okay.
I'll need a DFS function to generate all the strings for me. So mm, yeah, I also need a list. I'm going to define a set in
Mm-hmm.
case there are duplicates uh,
Okay.
for the result.
Okay.
Um, we'll start with this, and then what the DFS will do is if the length of this string reaches n into 2, uh, because n is given as a pair. So if n is equal to 3, then the string length must be 6, right? So once this string length reaches that, then I will check for validity. This function which we will write later. I'll check whether this string is valid. If it is valid, then we will uh, add to res the parse string.
Okay.
If it is not valid, we won't do anything. But then also when it reaches this length, we must return, because there is no more DFS to be done once the length
Okay.
is reached.
Mm-hmm.
If the length is not reached, then we will rerun the DFS, but we will run it for parse string plus open parenthesis, and we will run the DFS for close parenthesis as well. So this will keep, yeah, this will keep on incrementing the strings with different combinations of open and close until it reaches the length.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I will call the initial DFS with the, yeah, to be honest, I could have just called it with like this. There is one simplification which we can do. We can just call the DFS for open brackets, because we can never have a valid string with closed brackets. So that cuts out half the computation. So I'll just call it. I mean, there is a small edge case. If n is 0, okay, n cannot be 0. Fine. No problem. Um,
And I
yeah,
guess can't be zero.
yeah,
Then
yeah. N
start.
cannot,
Yes.
yeah. So n cannot be 0. So this will work. So finally, I'll return a list of the res, which was a set. Yeah.
Okay. Let's run it. Oh, before that, let's implement the is valid method.
Okay. Mm. So validity, we will need some sort of a stack. Uh, okay. So string. Yeah, again, I need to think for a second.
Hmm.
Yeah. So we will have to loop through the um, string, every character, and if the character is equal to an open brace, then I will add it to the string. Oh, sorry. If the character is equal to a closed brace, then I will check if element at the top of the stack is equal to a open brace. Then I'll have to delete that element from the stack. If top of stack is equal to this, if top of stack is not equal to this, then I think already we can say that it is an invalid. Yeah, let me check this once.
Mhm.
Through the stack. Is closed. Yeah, I think this should be correct.
Okay, let's run it for, let's say, 4 for
Okay.
test. Yes.
Um, as in you want to do like a dry run?
Not dry run, let's run it properly. Okay, from plain text, you can switch it to, let's say, Python 3.
Python. Okay.
Okay, and you can comment, okay, uncomment the code you need
I
and
see.
just call generate parentheses with argument as 4.
Okay. Um, we should be able to call is valid, right? It's part of the same module, so do I need any sort of... Yeah, I think this should work. Generate parenthesis for valid syntax, okay. Oh, okay. List index out of range. Oh, because stack is empty.
Where's the problem you're getting?
It's an list index out of range because I believe initially the stack is empty, right? So
Okay.
I'm checking for the last I'm checking for the last element in an empty stack. So I think I have to add a condition.
Okay. Okay. Let's run it again.
Yeah. Let me think. If there is a stack, if you encounter a closed braces and there is no stack, then also we have to return false. Yeah, that is correct. Um, oh, I have to print the return, probably.
Yes, you have to print the output.
Res is equal to print the res. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, do we want some sort of count or something like in order
Okay.
to?
No count, but if you see the first output is not correct, right? The thing is not, the parentheses are not balanced.
Um,
In fact, not the first one. In most of the cases, I can see the parentheses are not balanced.
mhm. 1, 2, 3. I believe the length is actually wrong. No. 1, 2, 3,
No, the
4,
length is correct.
6, 7, 8.
Can you check your isValid function again if it's correct?
Yeah. Yeah, let me just think why.
If there is an element in stack, then return true. Are we sure?
Yeah, yeah. Made a mistake here. If anything is in the stack, then we should
Then
return
it's not
false.
balanced.
Only if it's empty, we have to return a true. Yeah,
Correct.
yeah. I think this seems more like a reasonable output.
Correct.
You can print the count also.
Yes.
14.
It's 14.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Let's switch to another problem. Just one feedback on this one. So, like, the entire problem statement is correct,
Mm-hmm.
but it will fail for relatively larger inputs. If you try it for, let's say, 100 or 120, so you just have to, not so critical, just as minor feedback, that instead of checking all the valid parentheses or valid strings, you
Mm-hmm.
just need to figure out if there is a way, if you can discard few strings earlier.
Yeah, I could.
Yes.
This was more of a brute force way of doing it.
Mhm.
So what I would have done as an
No,
improvement was,
yes, yes, but the solution is correct. Not exactly brute force, I will say, but okay, that's correct.
yeah, just optimization.
Mm-hmm.
At every string length, I would check for validity.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, at let's say you're giving me 4 pairs. When 2 pairs itself is generated, I would check for validity and reject that.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, basically, if you're already able to tell within like length 4 of the string that something is invalid, you don't need to proceed further down that path, right? To generate
Understood.
more complicated string length. So that would actually cut out a significant amount of time. And
Yes.
also for larger inputs, I wouldn't use a DFS. I would use a I would use a DFS with a stack, or I would use a queue. Basically, recursion for larger inputs might also cause a problem, right? So a memory issue. So yeah.
Understood. Understood. Okay, let me ask you the next problem statement. So we'll discuss more about asynchronous programming here.
Hmm.
Okay, and maybe some, let's say, something we'll discuss about the design principles, the solid principles,
Okay,
and then we'll, let's say, the last topic will be, let's say, something around test cases, like, right.
got it.
So let me print the problem statement for you.
Uh, yeah.
Okay, so let me summarize it for you. So basically, you are, let's say, building a asynchronous web scraper. Okay, so let's say you have 50 API endpoints. You have to 50 yes, 50 APIs endpoints, basically 50 URLs, right? So you have to scrap the entire, let's say, data of that 50 URLs. That 50 URLs can go nested. Let's say if I am exploring one URL, maybe in that page we have multiple URLs, right? Then we have to go again to that URL. So one URL can chain a form of URLs, right? And again, we will not go into that detail. Let's say if a URL is there and you get another URL, then how will you scrap that? We'll not go into that detail. The
Hmm.
main focus is here to, let's say, you are given 50 endpoints, you have to scrap them. Scrap function is a black box to you, right? You have to just call scrap function. Okay, but the main focus will be here, how will you implement them concurrently? How will you make sure that you are limiting the number of requests to the external URLs to 10 at a given time? Because things can go nested, right? One URL can make request to another, then let's say one URL can have 10 pages and 10 another request, but you have to limit the entire number of requests to 10 only,
Hmm.
right? And basically you are storing the data, let's say the scrap data, in a dictionary or somewhere else. But let's assume that black box is scrap function is black box to us, right? So if I summarize it to you, so okay, let's come to the requirements first. So basically we have to write a Python code which will basically use async I or AIO HTTP for, let's say, asynchronous request.
Hmm.
So you will be basically evaluated on the basis of how you make proper usage of, let's say, async, await, and the concurrency management, basically,
Hmm.
right? So for concurrency management, you can either use semaphore or okay, semaphore is not mandatory to use. If you have another way to implement that, feel free to do that.
Hmm.
Okay, and Okay, that's it. We'll come to the also part later on, but let's implement it first. Okay, let me write let's say boilerplate function for you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so let's coming to the, this is the function signature. You will write your code here. Okay, and this is, let's say, def scrap method, right?
Uh-huh.
So this is endpoint. Okay, and this is basically a black box to you. Okay, already implemented, so you just have to call it, and you need not to bother about what the scrap function is doing, right? The
Uh-huh.
main focus will be here to how will you use your scrap function effectively. Basically, how will you call that, how will you make sure that it's limiting the concurrent request to 10 only, right? The
Hmm.
proper usage of async AIO, that's it. So I
Uh,
hope you got the problem statement. Let me know if you have any questions.
yeah, I got it, but just I wanted to mention I I haven't really prepared for the this async await stuff. Um,
Okay.
to be honest, in my past experience, I've used multi-threading, Python's multi-threading multi-processing library,
Okay. Okay.
which I'm assuming does the same thing, as in you generate, as in Python natively doesn't support multi-threading, so rather it does a multi-processing. But then you have a process manager, which some library, I think it is called Python multi-processing, which allows you to manage these processes. So using that, I would create like how many ever processes which are given. So simultaneous requests to 10 at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would limit it to 10 number of processes, and then call scrape from every single one of those processes. Um,
Okay, understood. So I got the point. So basically, you are mentioning that you don't have that much, let's say, experience or knowledge on how async things work in Python, right? So
yeah,
you have idea of threading, let's say, multi-threading, multi-processing, right?
yeah, that I have used. Yeah.
Okay, so you have any, let's say, do you have any idea, like, what's the difference between, let's say, async and threading? Let's say when to use async IO over threads. Do you have any idea on that part?
Mm, Let me think
Mhm.
for a second. Um, Async is not, I mean, async, not necessarily, I guess, creating multiple. Hmm. Okay. Threading, I think threading, we understand the concept, like where basically in multi-threading, your CPU has multiple threads, and you can give different work to each of these threads, and they will work in parallel. Whereas I believe async just means you are um, deferring execution, not exactly deferring execution, but you're deferring the result of the execution to a later point of time. You are basically like, I want to perform a task, I don't need the result right now, you give it to me after 10 seconds or how much ever time,
Okay,
and i
that
will i will wait.
that
But
we do in threads as well, right? That's the same thing in threads. The only difference is how they internally work.
yeah.
So basically, so async and thread, the basically difference you mentioned is not that much, I'll say, correct, because they both are deferring the execution. So threads, on threads we can also do that.
Hmm.
Okay, do your job. I don't bother about you. I'll come back to you later and we'll fetch the result from you. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
Async IO does the same thing, but the way they are operating, let's say, that's different. So it's completely okay if you don't know about that.
Hmm.
So okay, having said that, so you know about the multi-threads and multi-processing part, right? So let's say you have to implement it using the multi-threading. So can you quickly?
Yeah, the thing is, I've only used it a few times, so I don't really know the syntax, or as in,
Okay,
I
okay,
can't recollect right now.
okay,
Um, I'm assuming I can maybe try to describe how I would do it, but I think implementing would be hard
Instead,
without.
and instead of writing a let's say working code, can we write the pseudo code?
Sure, I'll
Yeah,
try.
we can. Yes, because we need to. Yes, at least let's start with the pseudocode part. No need to import the libraries. Let's
Okay,
say just write the pseudocode. Okay, then there is a function there. You will do that part at that time. You will
got
do
it,
that part, right? Something like this.
got it. So I'll just write comments. So um, I would say something like max processes. I will set to 10 because that is how many simultaneous requests that we can do at any given time. Um, Create multiple process. So we are given a list of endpoints, is it?
Hmm.
As the input. I say this is the list, the endpoints list. Okay. I guess always we can. I'm not sure, but I'm assuming that we need to keep track of which endpoints are currently being processed, so that the next process doesn't pick up the same endpoint.
Okay, that's the responsibility of scrap function. Let's not bother about it. Okay, the scrap function is,
Um,
let's say, already maintaining a data set, and if the endpoint is coming same, then scrap function is basically ignoring it, right? So you
okay,
need not to maintain that.
got it. But scrap is only taking in one endpoint.
But let's say there is a list at, let's say, class level, okay, or a set at class level,
Got it.
and it's using that set function to compare. It's set to compare the class set to compare.
Okay. Um, yeah, I just don't know an efficient way to move through the list in order to allocate one process for each endpoint.
Okay.
So there will be some mechanism there. Um, I'll just write that as an abstraction that um, handle list traversal and process allocation. Um, so then finally I will do something like process list dot execute. while process list is not empty. Yeah, I'm not very clear. I mean, about this sort of code, but this is where my thought process is going towards. So we'll define a set number of max processes.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is given as 10. So you'll create multiple processes limited to total number of max processes. So in this case, it is 10. So we will loop through each process, and for each process, we'll execute one of the endpoints in the list, right?
Okay.
So handling the list traversal and which endpoint must be allocated to which process, that there will be some logic to figure that out. So
Understood.
while the process list is not empty, you
Okay.
will keep on executing each of the processes.
Okay. 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 Got the idea. So, okay, fair enough. So, just one or two more follow-up questions on this.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say this entire logic has been implemented into a code. Okay, the
Mhm.
code is over there. Okay, I just want you to think of, let's say, some ways to I say apply some refactoring on that part. Refactoring, I mean, okay, let me explain the problem statement to you. So let's say uh, this is the code, right? So the first step is basically setting the max process to 10.
Mhm.
Okay, and now you have created multi processes, right? So
Mhm.
basically all of the things you are doing here in one function only, a single function only, right?
Yeah.
So let's say if you have to make this code modular and reusable, let's say,
Mhm.
split it into, let's say, multiple components that say, instead of scrapping, I want to create a, let's say, mm, some another process which also needs to be done, let's say, by using multiprocessing, right? And I
Mhm.
want to use some parts of it into that basically process, that function, basically, let's say setting the max process. So let's say I have created a function and make it reusable so that other functions can also use this, right?
Mhm.
Just passing the processes as an argument. And same go for, let's say, the list traversal and process allocation part. I
Mhm.
want to make it, let's say, a usable function, right?
Mhm.
So do you have any suggestions for like how you implement that? So just want to check
Yeah.
the modular part and reusable, extensible part of this code.
Got it. So mainly, um, what I would do is I would create a multi-processing class, um, right? Um, so this multi-processing class will, I would say, is mainly responsible for executing this sort of a executing this sort of a multi-processing use case.
Mm-hmm.
So any part of the business logic which wants to do some multiprocessing should be able to make an instance of this class, and providing the number of max processes, it should be able to run concurrently, right?
Okay, okay,
So I would in the yeah, like some parts of it I will try to implement. So it will have some sort of a max processes um, component, which will give it a which it will define to it. Um, Also, for example, this part, right, handling list traversal and process allocation,
mm-hmm.
this is not really a function of multiprocessing.
Mm-hmm.
It is more of a, I would say, it shouldn't be the responsibility of the multiprocessing class, but it is also closely tied to it because we are doing process allocation. So I would do something like a multiprocessing under the multiprocessing sort of hierarchy itself,
Mm-hmm.
but specifically related to uh, process allocation,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is more like a, manager class, I would say, for multiprocessing. So thereby you are not putting the functionality of this process allocation into the multiprocessing class because I'm trying to follow single responsibility principle, where multiprocessing is only doing the core functionality of multiprocessing, which is
Okay.
um, allocating the number of processes, max number of processes, and going through with the actual execution of the multiprocessing. So
Hmm.
there will be an execute function. There will also be a um, allocation, process allocation. So this can just be fed an object of this class.
Okay.
So I would just call multiprocessing with, let's say, um, um, MP object. I will say max processes is 10, and then for using MP, I will pass it to this one. Process allocation where, and then this MP, and this will do various functions like allocate, right? Um, here it will do some work, and then this part, yeah, or this can even be a sort of in, this can be an abstract method, process allocation as well, where um, this process allocation is actually being implemented by this function.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that would also separate out the responsibilities of these classes. Um, yeah, and then finally you will call mp.execute. Yeah, something like this. Again, it's not perfect, but
Understood. Understood. It's fine. Let's add the def execute. Okay. Let's add the pass statement.
yeah.
Okay. So okay, one last follow-up question. So just it would be a bit theoretical. So have you worked on unit test cases?
I have, yes.
Okay, so let's say just this entire, let's say, scrap, fetch all data, multiprocessing, whatever code you have written from scrap method.
Hmm.
Let's say you are assigned a task to write test cases for that. Okay,
Hmm.
I'll say let's say unit test cases for that. Let's go
Hmm.
a bit more to about depth. So,
Hmm.
like what functions will you target here?
Hmm. So with unit test cases, you would want to target, um, mainly as a rule of thumb, I would target the most important, aspects, right? The ones which are core to the business logic, right? Um, but yeah, so whichever part out of all of this that we consider the most important, right? So I would say like scrape, right? Because scrape is the part which is actually doing the core business logic, right? Which is actually getting the data from the endpoint and then putting it into putting it into the data sets and stuff. So definitely I would target scrape.
Okay,
Um, and then multiprocessing also, we could consider as a important facet of this whole thing. So the process allocation part, I think, is quite important, because if we make a mistake here, then nothing will work, right? Parts like execute, that is actually executing the things, or actually just fetching from the endpoint, right? These things can be mocked, um,
okay,
because For example, inside scrape, the HTTP request which I'm actually making to the endpoint, that is it is an external dependency, right? You cannot reliably test it, so you'll have to mock that endpoint. But the logic around the actual making the HTTP call, like what the data that we receive from the endpoint, whether it matches a particular structure, whether it might match the API, the API structure, right? Then whether
Understood.
that data is being put in a proper JSON format into a dictionary, right? You
Understood.
can check the keys of the dictionary. Those sort of things you can actually implement in
Oh,
the test. But I would mock the endpoint request. I would also mock the multiprocessing execution.
understood.
But the process allocation and the script, I would write tests for that.
So you have used unit tests or PyTest. So
I have
which are
actually
doing?
used both. I have used PyTest. PyTest, yeah, more frequently I'd use PyTest for big chunk of tests. But again, quite a few years. I mean, the structure, the syntax and stuff I don't remember, but some of the PyTest features I do still remember, like fixtures. Um, yeah, there is also a way to if you just give it a list, it will run through all the test cases in the list. So I'm not sure about the names of these features, but yeah, I do remember because PyTest it offers more functionality than the basic unit test library.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay, okay, Raghav. I guess I am done from my side. So, okay, Raghav. So, can we end the discussion?
yeah, sure.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much, Raghav. It was nice talking to you. Have a great day. Bye.
Likewise, you too. Thank you so much.